The night my mother-in-law shoved me off a rooftop. While I was 8 weeks pregnant, everyone thought the worst part was the fall. They were wrong. The worst part was watching my husband stand there and do nothing. Less than 6 months later, security footage, deleted family messages, and one document they never expected me to keep would destroy everything they had spent decades building. My name is Celeste Rowan. I was a labor and delivery nurse from Salem, Massachusetts, and this is the story of how a wealthy family tried to convince the world that my baby was a lie. After won the night everything. Broken me name is Celeste Rowan. I was 35 years old, 8 weeks pregnant, standing on the rooftop terrace of the Grand Harbor Hotel in Boston, the night my mother-in-law decided my baby was a lie. I had practiced the words all week. We are pregnant. 2 simple words. I had whispered them in the bathroom mirror before work, in my car at red lights, and once in the quiet hallway outside labor and delivery, while a newborn cried behind a closed door. I thought those words would change the way the Caldwell family looked at me. I thought a baby might soften the sharp edges of a family built around money, appearances, and obedience. I was wrong. Before that night, I was just Celeste Rowan, senior labor and delivery nurse at St. Vincent Women's Hospital. I had worked there since 2012. 12 years of night shifts, emergency C-sections, exhausted mothers, frightened fathers, and tiny heartbeats appearing on monitors at 3 in the morning like miracles trying to be heard. The job made me careful. I wrote everything down: times, names, symptoms, exact words. At the hospital, details could save lives. I never imagined they would save mine. I bought my own house in Salem in 2018, a small white colonial with old hardwood floors and a kitchen window that caught the morning light. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody rescued me. I paid for it with double shifts, skipped vacations, and the kind of discipline people call cold when they do not understand survival. Then I met Ethan Caldwell at a hospital fundraiser in Boston. He was handsome in a soft, polished way, with the easy confidence of a man who had never had to wonder if a bill would clear. He remembered my coffee order after one conversation. He laughed at the right times. He made me feel seen. And after years of being the nurse who took care of everyone else, that felt dangerous and beautiful. We married in 2022. His family did not dislike me openly at first. That would have been too honest. They were polite in the way expensive people are polite when they want you to remember there is a locked door between you and them. Vivian Caldwell was 64, silver-haired, graceful, and colder than any operating room I had ever stepped into. She controlled the Caldwell Legacy Trust, $18 million in old family money, investments, properties, and voting power that kept everyone around her in line. Her husband Richard was 67, a retired corporate attorney who had mastered the art of standing behind his wife while pretending not to agree with her. Ethan's sister Vizessa was 36, all pearls and charity boards and smiles that landed like paper cuts. Ethan ran Caldwell Development Group. Though I learned slowly that ran was a generous word. His company survived on family loans, bridge financing, and Vivian's approval. When projects went thin, the trust filled the gap. When Ethan looked worried before family dinners, I thought it was because his mother was difficult. I did not yet understand that his entire life was financed by her mood. The pregnancy test was positive on a Tuesday morning after a 12-hour shift. I stood in our bathroom with my scrubs still on, one hand over my mouth, staring at the 2 pink lines until they blurred. I had seen women cry over tests like that. I had held their hands. I had said congratulations in the calm voice nurses use when they know a person's life has split into before and after. But when it was mine, I could barely breathe. At 8 weeks, I went for the first scan. The room was dim and warm. The technician turned the screen and there it was. A tiny flicker, impossibly small, impossibly alive. Then the heartbeat came through, fast and bright, like a hummingbird trapped inside a machine. Ethan cried when I showed him the ultrasound photo. Real tears, at least I believed they were real then. He pressed the picture to his chest and kept saying he could not believe it. He said his mother's birthday dinner that Saturday would be perfect. A family announcement. A gift on top of a gift. I wanted to believe him. Vivian's 64th birthday was held at the Grand Harbor Hotel on a private rooftop terrace overlooking Boston Harbor. The September air was cool enough to make the lights look sharper. The terrace had glass railings along one side, low stone planters along the garden edge, and a sunken courtyard below with boxwoods, pale stone, and a narrow fountain. I noticed the drop the moment we arrived. Nurses notice hazards automatically. Wet floor, loose cord, low wall. 10 feet is not a cliff, but 10 feet is enough. There were almost 30 guests. Family, board members, old friends, donors from Vivian's charity circle. Vanessa moved through them like she was hosting a campaign event. Richard stood near the bar, nodding at people as though silence were a family duty. Margaret Caldwell, Ethan's aunt, gave me a small smile, and then looked away too quickly. Nathan Reed, Ethan's cousin, caught my eye from across the terrace. He looked as if he wanted to speak. Twice he started toward me. Twice Vanessa intercepted him. That was the first thing that felt wrong. The second was Vivian and Vanessa near the bar, heads close, voices low. When I approached, they stopped talking at the exact same time. Vivian's smile appeared instantly, bright and perfect. "Celeste," she said, "how lovely that you could make it." Her cheek barely touched mine. Ethan handed me a club soda and squeezed my fingers. His palm was damp. I asked if he was all right. He smiled without looking at me and said he was just nervous. I thought he was nervous about the announcement. Now I know better. The cake came out at 9. Candles flickered in the harbor wind. Vivian closed her eyes to make a wish while everyone clapped. A string quartet played softly near the doors. Ethan lifted his glass, and I felt the terrace turn toward us. He said we had something to share. His voice cracked, and for one perfect second I loved him more than I had ever loved him. Then he said we were having a baby. There was a gasp from one of the cousins. Margaret covered her mouth. Someone clapped. I touched the inside pocket of my purse where the ultrasound photo rested in its little envelope. I had imagined Vivian freezing for a second, then softening. I had imagined her becoming a grandmother in front of all these people and finally seeing me as family. Vivian set down her champagne glass. The sound was small, but it cut through everything. She looked first at Ethan, then at me, slow and cold like she was inspecting a forged check. She said there was no baby. The terrace went silent. The quartet stopped playing. A woman near the cake lowered her fork. Ethan's hand loosened around mine, but he did not speak. Vivian turned slightly so the whole room could hear her. She said, "My son is attached to an $18 million trust, and suddenly you appear with a pregnancy no one has seen. How convenient." Heat climbed up my throat, but my body went still. That hospital part of me, the part that stayed calm when monitors screamed, took over. I told her I was 8 weeks pregnant. I told her there was a heartbeat. Vivian took one step toward me. She said, "Women like you always know when to make an entrance." Vanessa did not look surprised. Richard stared at the floor. Nathan's face had gone pale. Margaret whispered Vivian's name, but Vivian kept moving. She said, "If there is a baby, prove it." I could feel everyone watching, some curious, some embarrassed, some already deciding which version would be easier to believe. The rich mother protecting her son, or the nurse who married into money. I said I would not do this in front of her guests. Ethan finally spoke, but his voice was small. He told his mother to stop, almost like a child asking permission. Vivian ignored him. She looked at my purse, she looked at my stomach, then she said, "Prove it right now." My back touched the low stone planter wall. I remember that detail clearly, the cold edge against the backs of my legs. I remember the harbor wind lifting a strand of Vanessa's hair. I remember Nathan stepping forward and Vivian raising one hand, not to me. I looked at Ethan. He did nothing. That was the first betrayal. Not the worst one, but the first one I understood while it was happening. I said, "There is a heartbeat, Vivian. Whether you believe me tonight or not, this child exists." For 1 second, her face changed. Something cracked under the polish. Fear, rage, memory. I did not know then. I only knew she was not seeing me. She was seeing some old enemy wearing my face. Then she reached for my purse. I turned slightly, instinctively protecting the ultrasound photo inside it. Vivian's hands hit my shoulders hard. Not a brush, not a stumble, both palms full force, the stone caught me behind the knees, the terrace lights tilted. I heard someone scream my name. I heard Ethan inhale sharply. Too late to matter. Then the sky, the harbor, the faces above me, and the low wall all changed places. I did not fall 11 stories. I went over the planter wall and dropped into the sunken courtyard below, 10 feet. 10 feet is enough. I landed on my right side. Pain exploded through my wrist before I understood what had broken. My ribs struck the stone border of the fountain, and every bit of air left my body. For a moment there was no sound, only pressure, bright and white and terrible. Then everything came rushing back. Voices above me, a chair scraping, someone yelling to call 911, the fountain water running beside my face, the taste of blood or fear in my mouth. I tried to move, but my body refused. My hand went to my stomach. The baby. That was the only thought I had. Not Vivian, not Ethan, not the guests staring down from the terrace. Just the tiny heartbeat I had heard 2 days earlier in a dark room at St. Vincent's. The sound that had made the whole world feel possible. Ethan appeared at the edge above me, then disappeared, then came stumbling down the courtyard steps. He reached me shaking, crying, saying my name over and over. His hands hovered uselessly above my body. I wanted him to help me. I wanted him to tell me our baby was safe. But all I could hear was Vivian's voice from above, sharp and panicked now, saying she had barely touched me. The sirens came closer. Red light flashed against the stone. I tried to ask about the baby, but the words would not come out. The last thing I saw before the paramedics reached me was Ethan looking up toward his mother, then down at me, as if he still had not decided which direction mattered more. Chapter 2. The story they wanted to sell. The ride to St. Vincent's felt longer than any ambulance ride I had ever watched from the other side of the doors. I knew the questions before they asked them: name, age, weeks pregnant, pain level, any bleeding, loss of consciousness. I answered when I could, but my voice kept breaking into air. The paramedic closest to me was young, maybe 25, with kind eyes and a steady hand on my shoulder. He kept telling me to stay with him. I wanted to tell him I had stayed with women through worse. I wanted to tell him I knew exactly what the silence between monitor beeps could mean. Instead, I kept one hand on my stomach and tried not to imagine all the things I had seen happen in rooms like the one waiting for me. Ethan rode in the front. I could hear him talking to someone on the phone before the paramedic told him to put it away. His voice was low and frantic, but I caught one word before the doors closed around us. Mom, not baby. Not Celeste. Mom at the hospital. Everything became bright and fast. Fluorescent lights, rolling wheels, a nurse I knew from triage calling my name, with her professional voice and her frightened eyes. Someone cut the sleeve of my dress. Someone wrapped my wrist before I could look at it. My right arm throbbed in a deep hot rhythm that told me even before the x-ray did broken. My ribs screamed every time I breathed. The doctor pressed gently along my side, and I hated the way his face changed when I flinched. A tech slid gel across my lower abdomen. The room narrowed around that single movement. All the pain in my wrist and ribs disappeared beneath a colder pain, the kind that had no location and no treatment. The Doppler moved once. Static, it moved again. More static. I stopped breathing. Olivia Mercer appeared at my left side like she had been summoned by fear itself. She was the charge nurse, on my floor 42, sharp, warm, and impossible to intimidate. Her hair was pulled back in the same tight bun she wore through every night shift, but her face was bare of the humor she usually brought into a room. She took my uninjured hand and squeezed once. I wanted to ask if she thought my baby was gone. I could not make my mouth form the words. The doctor adjusted the Doppler lower. Then it came fast, fierce, clear, a heartbeat. The sound filled the room like a door opening. I cried so hard my ribs punished me for it. The doctor said the rate was strong. The baby was measuring appropriately. There was a small placental bleed, an abruption scare, and I would need monitoring and rest. But for that moment, the only sentence that mattered was the one. Olivia leaned close and whispered near my ear. She is still here with you. I did not know yet that she was a girl. Not then. Not officially. But Olivia said she, and I held on to that word like a blanket. Ethan came in after they set my wrist. His face was gray, his hair disordered, his expensive jacket streaked with courtyard dirt. He looked like a man who had been badly frightened, and for 1 weak second I almost reached for him. He stood near the foot of the bed instead of beside me. His phone buzzed in his hand. He looked down at it, then at me, then back down. Olivia noticed. Of course she did. Nurses notice everything. She stepped between him and the monitor without saying a word. I asked him where Vivian was. He swallowed. He said she was shaken up, shaken up. I was in a hospital bed with a broken wrist, bruised ribs, a threatened pregnancy, and my husband told me the woman who pushed me was shaken up. Something inside me went very quiet. I stayed 3 days for monitoring. The bleeding did not worsen. The baby's heartbeat stayed strong. My wrist went into a cast that reached almost to my knuckles. Purple bruises rose across both shoulders in the shape of hands. Olivia helped me photograph them in the bathroom mirror, because my right hand was useless, and because she understood, without needing me to explain, that there would be a story later. And bodies heal faster than lies do. On the second night, I woke to voices in the hallway. Ethan thought the door was closed. It was not. Hospital doors never close the way people think they do. His voice came through first, thin and exhausted. He said, I know. But she is hurt, then silence, then he said it happened so fast, another pause, then the sentence that changed my marriage more than the fall had. Maybe it was not exactly a push. I lay completely still. He kept talking. He said there were people everywhere. He said maybe I stepped back. He said maybe Mom reached for the purse, and Celeste lost her balance. He said the word maybe like it was a bridge he could build between the truth and the family that paid for his life. I turned my head toward the window and looked at the dark reflection of myself. Pale face, hospital gown, cast, bruises. A woman who had spent 12 years charting what was real now, listening to her husband revise it in real time. Olivia came in an hour later to check the monitor. I told her what I had heard. She did not gasp. She did not tell me to calm down. She just looked at me for a long moment and said, we are going to document everything. That was the first time I felt the ground come back under me. By the time I was discharged, Vivian had called Ethan 34 times. I knew because I saw the name lighting up his phone while he packed my bag. He did not answer every call, but every time the screens lit up, his shoulders tightened like a leash had been pulled. He drove me back to my house in Salem, not our house, mine. The white colonial I had bought before the Caldwells knew my name. He helped me up the front steps and set my hospital bag near the door. He looked around the living room as if it belonged to someone he was visiting. Then he said Vanessa and his parents were coming over. I stared at him. He said they just wanted to talk. They arrived 40 minutes later without asking permission. Vanessa came first, in a camel coat and heels that clicked against my porch like punctuation. Richard followed with his hands in his pockets. Ethan hovered near the fireplace. Vivian did not come, she did not need to. Vanessa had been sent to speak with her mother's voice. I sat on my own couch with my cast in my lap and Olivia beside me. I had not invited Olivia either, but she had followed us from the hospital in her own car and walked in carrying soup, discharge instructions, and the expression of a woman daring anyone to ask why she was there. Vanessa folded herself into the chair across from me and spoke gently, which made every word worse. She said the family was concerned. She said there had been confusion. She said emotions had run high. She said everyone needed to be careful about language before reputations were damaged. I asked what language she meant. Vanessa looked at my cast, then away from it. She said no one wanted this to become a legal misunderstanding. She said Vivian had reached for my purse because I refused to show proof. She said the terrace was crowded and I had been standing too close to the edge. She said if I started calling it an attack, people might wonder whether I had staged a fall to force Ethan into staying married and to gain leverage over the Caldwell Legacy Trust. Olivia's hand tightened around her soup container. Richard said nothing. Ethan said nothing. That silence was a second injury, cleaner than the first and somehow deeper. I asked Vanessa, who broke my wrist, if I staged it. For the first time, her smooth face faltered. Then she recovered and said, trauma makes people remember things incorrectly. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I had heard that tone before from relatives in waiting rooms, from men explaining away bruises, from people who wanted a chart to say something softer than the truth. They left a business card on my coffee table. Caldwell Family Council. As if a card could intimidate the woman whose body was the evidence. 2 days later, the story escaped my living room. A post appeared in a private North Shore Facebook group. No names at first, just enough details for everyone who had been at the birthday dinner to know. A nurse marries into money, announces a convenient pregnancy, causes a scene at a family event, then threatens legal action after an accident. By morning, the comments had turned it into something uglier. Fake pregnancy, gold digger nurse, poor Ethan. Vivian was only protecting her family. I sat at my kitchen table, reading strangers discuss my body, my baby, my marriage, and the contents of a trust I had legally signed away before I ever wore Ethan's ring. At 11:15, Hart from St. Vincent's HR called. Her voice was careful. Too careful, she said. The hospital had become aware of public posts involving my name and a potential reputational matter. She said they were not accusing me of anything. She said they simply needed to understand whether there was any issue that could affect patient trust. Pot trust, that was the phrase that got me. I had spent 12 years earning trust in rooms where women were scared, bleeding, laboring, grieving, praying. Vivian had needed less than 48 hours to make people wonder if I was the kind of nurse who would fake a pregnancy for money. I told Emily I would provide documentation, hospital records, discharge papers, anything the hospital needed. My voice did not shake until after I hung up. That evening, Margaret Caldwell called. I almost did not answer. Ethan's family had already taken enough air out of my house. But Margaret had looked at me differently on the terrace. Not kindly exactly, but knowingly, as if she had seen the scene before and wished she had stopped it earlier. When I answered, she was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said she was sorry. I asked her for what. She said for not speaking sooner. I waited. She breathed in unsteadily and said Vivian has done this before, but not like this. Before I could ask what she meant, she said she could not talk yet. Not safely. Then she hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand long after the screen went dark. 10 minutes later, Vivian called. Her name on my phone looked almost elegant. I let it ring twice, then answered. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask about the baby. She said this had gone far enough. Her voice was calm again, polished back into place. She said if I stopped now, the family could make the hospital questions disappear. The Facebook post could be handled. Ethan could come home. Everyone could heal privately. I asked if that was an apology. The silence on the other end was almost delicate. Then Vivian said I was not thinking clearly. She said pregnancy hormones and pain medication could distort judgment. She said powerful families attract accusations, and smart women know when to step away before they ruin themselves. I looked at the business card still sitting on my coffee table. I told her I was not stepping away from the truth. Her voice changed then. Not loud. Worse than loud. She said, truth is expensive, Celeste. Are you sure you can afford it? Then she hung up. I slept badly that night, if sleep is the right word for closing your eyes and watching a low stone wall rush toward you over and over. Around 2 in the morning, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It was Nathan Reed. He wrote that he was sorry. He wrote that I needed to see something before the family made it disappear. Then 3 screenshots arrived, one after another. A group chat. Caldwell family. The first message was from Vanessa, dated 4 days before Vivian's birthday dinner. She said if Celeste makes an announcement, Mom wants everyone ready. The second was from Vivian. She wrote that women like me counted on public sympathy and that the only way to stop it was to make me prove it in front of witnesses. The third was from Nathan. He had written this is going too far. I stared at the screen until the words blurred, then sharpened again. The terrace had not been chaos. It had been scheduled. Chapter 3 The Receipts. By morning, I understood the difference between being hurt and being hunted. Pain made you small for a while. It narrowed the world to your wrist, your ribs, the cautious way you stood from a chair. But being hunted did something else. It sharpened everything. The sound of a car slowing outside my house. The way Ethan avoided my eyes over coffee. The sudden silence when my phone lit up with another notification. Nathan asked to meet at a small coffee shop in Marblehead, 20 minutes from my house. Far enough from Boston that no one from Vivian's circle would likely walk in wearing pearls and a practiced smile. I wore a loose sweater, my cast tucked against my chest, and kept my left hand over my stomach the entire drive. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in the back corner with a paper cup untouched in front of him. Nathan Reed was 39, Ethan's cousin, a quiet man who worked in commercial insurance and had always seemed slightly out of place at Caldwell events. Too plain-spoken, too uncomfortable around expensive cruelty. When he saw me, his face changed. Not pity. Worse than pity. Guilt. He stood too quickly. Celeste, I'm sorry. I sat down slowly, careful with my ribs. Then tell me what you sent me. He looked around the coffee shop before opening his laptop. I should have said something before the dinner. Yes, I said. You should have. He flinched, but he did not defend himself. That was the first thing that made me believe he might be worth listening to. Nathan turned the screen toward me. The group chat was there, longer than the 3 screenshots he had sent. Dozens of messages, dates, names, reactions. Little laughing emojis from relatives who had turned a pregnant woman's humiliation into a family logistics thread. Vanessa had started it. She wrote that Vivian was tired of Celeste playing innocent, and that if I made any announcement at the birthday dinner, they needed to be ready. A cousin asked what kind of announcement. Vanessa answered, pregnancy, probably. She has been acting too pleased with herself. Then Vivian wrote, if she claims there is a child, she can prove there is a child. I will not watch another woman bleed this family dry. Nathan had replied, this feels like a public ambush. No one responded to him. 3 messages later, Vanessa wrote, I'll make sure people are watching when Mom asks. I sat very still. My coffee went cold between us. I could feel the baby low in my body. Too small for movement, too present to be dismissed. They planned the question, I said. Nathan nodded. They planned the room, he said quietly. Vanessa told Margaret not to sit near you. She told me to keep my mouth shut. She told Ethan his job was to stay calm and not make it worse. My eyes lifted to his. Ethan knew. Nathan swallowed. He knew Vivian wanted to confront you if you announced it. I don't think he knew she would touch you. But he knew it would happen in public. That sentence landed slowly, like a blade finding its place. I had been angry with Ethan for freezing. I had been broken by the way he changed the story afterward. But this was different. This meant he had walked me onto that terrace, knowing his mother had sharpened something for me. I looked down at the ultrasound photo I had brought without knowing why. The little gray square sat beside Nathan's laptop. Proof that Vivian had demanded in front of 30 people what already existed in my purse. Nathan slid a flash drive across the table. I exported the thread before Vanessa started deleting things. Screenshots, metadata, timestamps. Everything I could pull from my phone. I don't know if it's enough legally, but it's real. I did not cry. I had wasted too many tears on people who kept receipts of their cruelty. I picked up the drive. It's enough to start. Andrea Reyes's office sat on the 9th floor of a brick building near Government Center, with a view of traffic, old stone, and the kind of Boston gray that makes every legal problem feel heavier. Andrea was 51, with silver threaded through dark hair and a voice that never hurried. She did not perform sympathy, she listened. The way good doctors listen, not to react, but to understand where the damage really is. I placed everything on her conference table. My hospital discharge papers, the X-ray report confirming the wrist fracture, the notes about rib contusions and the placental bleed. The photos Olivia helped me take, both shoulder bruises clear and ugly in the bathroom mirror. The ultrasound, the Facebook screenshots, Nathan's flash drive. Andrea moved through the materials in silence. Then she looked up. Did they offer you money yet? The question startled me. No, they will. She tapped the prenup folder I had almost forgotten I brought. Ethan's father had insisted on it before the wedding. I signed it in 2022 at a downtown Boston law office, while Vivian watched me across the table like she was finally seeing me tell the truth about myself. Andrea read 3 pages, then smiled without warmth. This is useful. I frowned. That document was meant to keep me away from their money. It still does, Andrea said. That is exactly why it helps you. The Caldwell Legacy Trust is separate family property. You waived any direct claim to it, clearly, repeatedly, in writing. If their public accusation is that you invented a pregnancy to reach $18 million, their own prenup destroys the motive. For the first time since the terrace, I felt something other than fear, not relief. Not yet, but a thin line of air, Andrea continued. We preserve Nathan's material properly. We request the hotel's incident report. We send a litigation hold letter today, and then we subpoena the footage. Hotels do not like liability. If there are cameras on that terrace, we will find out. Vivian said truth is expensive. I told her. Andrea looked at me over the folder. She was right, but so are lies. 2 days later, I went back to work for one modified shift because I needed to remember who I was before the Caldwells turned my life into a rumor. I could not lift patients with my cast, so Emily Hart cleared me for desk charting and patient intake review only. She was professional, but her eyes softened when she handed me the temporary accommodation paperwork. I've seen the medical documentation, Emily said quietly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry this followed you here. I nodded because if I spoke, I might not stop. For the first hour, things felt almost normal. The monitors beeped, nurses moved with purpose. A father in the hallway cried when his daughter was born. Then a patientress looked up from her bed and recognized me. Her mother recognized me first. The older woman's face tightened. Aren't you the nurse from that Facebook post? The room went quiet in that small, awful way hospital rooms can. The patient looked between us, confused then uncomfortable. Her mother lowered her voice, but not enough. I'd rather have someone else. I stood there with my cast, my badge, and 12 years of clean work hanging uselessly from a lanyard. Emily reassigned me without making a scene. That was kind. It also hurt more than if someone had shouted. I went into the medication room, closed the door, and pressed my good hand against the counter until the urge to break something passed. Vivian had not only pushed me off a terrace. She had pushed her story into the place where I was most myself. That afternoon, I had my follow-up ultrasound. Olivia came with me. Ethan offered by text 12 minutes before the appointment. I did not answer. The technician was gentle. She knew enough of the story not to ask too many questions. The room dimmed, the screen glowed, and for a moment all the legal folders, screenshots, rumors, and cold family voices fell away. There she was. Bigger than before, still tiny, still impossible. The technician smiled. Everything looks good today. Strong heartbeat. I breathed for the first time all morning. Then she asked if I wanted to know the sex, even though it was early and not every scan could confirm it with certainty. She said the blood work was back too, and between that and the ultrasound markers, they were confident. A girl, Olivia, started crying before I did. I stared at the screen and heard my own voice whisper a name I had not planned to say out loud. Mia. Olivia squeezed my hand. Mia Rowan, she said. I corrected her softly. Mia Rowan Caldwell for now. But Rowan is the part she will be proud of. That night, another piece fell into place. Jason Keller called from a blocked number. He was 40, the CFO of Caldwell Development Group, and I had met him twice at company holiday dinners. Careful man, nervous smile. Someone who always looked like he knew where the cracks were. He said he should not be calling. Then he called anyway. Ethan's company is in trouble, he said. Real trouble. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad Andrea had told me to start using. How much trouble? A little over $6 million in debt exposure if the Harbor Point project collapses. The trust has been backstopping him for years. Vivian signs off on bridge loans, personal guarantees, everything. I closed my eyes. So if Ethan stood against her, he could lose the company, Jason said. Maybe the house, definitely the lifestyle. The shape of my marriage became painfully clear. Ethan had not just been afraid of his mother's anger, he had been afraid of becoming an ordinary man. Jason hesitated. There is something else. Before the dinner, Ethan told me his mother might confront you. He said it would be uncomfortable but necessary. His words. Necessary. I wrote the word down. My hand shook only once. The money offer arrived the following morning through Vanessa, exactly as Andrea predicted. Not by email. Too traceable. By phone, Vanessa's voice was honey over broken glass. Mom wants this to end before you hurt yourself more. $100,000. You sign a confidentiality agreement. Withdraw any complaint and stop speaking to hospital HR about the family. I looked through my kitchen window at the maple tree in my yard, already turning red at the edges. $100,000 for a broken wrist, a threatened pregnancy, and a lie that reached my workplace. It's more than fair, Vanessa said. No, I said. It's more than guilty. Her silence was brief and sharp. You really think people will believe you over Vivian Caldwell? I looked at the ultrasound photo on the table. Mia's newest picture beside the first. A beginning and a continuation. I don't need them to believe me, I said. I need the records to speak. Then I hung up and wrote down the time, the number, the offer, and the exact words as closely as I remembered them. Andrea sent the subpoena to Grand Harbor Hotel that afternoon. The waiting was the worst part. Not because I doubted what happened. I knew what Vivian's hands felt like. I knew the shape of the bruises. I knew the sound my wrist made when I hit stone. But knowing is not the same as proving. For 6 days, I woke every morning afraid that the camera angle would be wrong, that the footage had overwritten, that Vivian's lawyers had already reached someone, that the world would accept her version because it was cleaner, richer, easier. On the 7th day, Andrea called. I was standing in Mia's empty room, though I had not started calling it that to anyone else yet. The walls were still pale blue from the previous owner. There was no crib, no dresser, nothing except a folded hospital blanket. Olivia had brought me, and 2 ultrasound pictures on the windowsill. Andrea did not waste words. The hotel complied. My fingers tightened around the phone. And a pause. They gave us the footage. Chapter 4. The truth on camera. I did not watch it. At home, Andrea told me that was not a recording you should see alone, and for once I did not argue with someone trying to protect me. Olivia drove me into Boston the next morning because Ethan had texted 3 times asking if he could come, and every message felt less like concern and more like a man trying to find out what I knew. Andrea's conference room was quiet when we arrived. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that tells you something has already been seen by people who are waiting for you to catch up. There was a laptop on the table, a folder beside it, and a box of tissues no one mentioned. Andrea looked at me carefully. You do not have to watch this. I do, I said. Olivia sat on my left, Andrea sat on my right. I placed my casted wrist on the table and watched Andrea press play. There was no sound. Somehow that made it worse. The camera showed the garden side of the Grand Harbor Terrace from above and slightly behind the bar. The lighting was sharp. The timestamp ran in the upper corner. I saw myself in the loose blue dress I had chosen, because I thought it looked soft and maternal. I saw Ethan standing 2 steps away from me. I saw Vivian crossing the terrace with her shoulders squared, Vanessa just behind her, watching. I watched the argument unfold without hearing a word. My body remembered what the video could not say. The champagne glass, the cold stone wall, Vivian's voice telling me to prove it. Ethan's silence. Then the moment came. Vivian reached toward my purse. I turned slightly. Her hands rose, both palms, both shoulders hard. My body went backward over the planter wall as if someone had cut the string holding me upright. Olivia made a sound beside me, small and furious. Andrea paused the video, only after I disappeared from the frame. I stared at the frozen image. Vivian's arms still extended. Ethan still standing there. Vanessa's mouth slightly open. Nathan already moving forward. Margaret turning away with both hands over her face. Andrea did not speak. I did not either. Then Olivia leaned forward and touched the screen, not on Vivian but on Ethan. How long? Andrea rewound a few seconds and let it play again. Ethan froze. 1 second, 2, 3. He did not reach for me. 4, 5, 6. Vivian stepped back. 7. Vanessa grabbed her mother's arm. 8. Nathan ran toward the wall. 9. Margaret screamed soundlessly on the screen. 10. 11. Only then did Ethan move. The room went so still I could hear the building pipes behind the wall. 11 seconds is not a long time unless your wife and unborn child have just gone over a wall. Then it becomes a lifetime. Andrea opened the folder beside the laptop. Inside was the incident report from Grand Harbor. 3 pages, signed by Samuel Green, the event manager, and 2 staff witnesses. Their language was plain, careful, and impossible to soften. Guest Vivian Caldwell pushed guest Celeste Rowan over the low stone planter wall, following a verbal confrontation. I read that sentence twice. A stranger in a hotel uniform had written the truth more clearly than my husband had been willing to say it. Andrea slid another page forward. There is more. The hotel preserved the 911 call log, staff statements, and the internal risk report. Their legal department wants no part of a cover-up. They are cooperating. For the first time since Vivian's hands hit my shoulders, the lie stopped feeling larger than me. It had weight, now shape. Timestamp witnesses, and it was no longer only my word against hers. Detective Lauren Brooks called later that afternoon. She was 44, Boston police, assigned after Andrea forwarded the hospital records and hotel packet to the appropriate office. Her voice was steady and professional, but there was something under it. I recognized from good nurses and good cops. She had already made up her mind to take the work seriously. We met 2 days later in a small interview room that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Olivia came with me. Andrea sat beside me and said almost nothing unless needed. Detective Brooks had the printed screenshots from Nathan, the hospital records, the hotel report, and stills from the video arranged in front of her. She asked me to tell the story from the beginning. So I did, not dramatically, not tearfully. In order, at the end she tapped the group chat printout. Mrs. Caldwell knew you were claiming to be pregnant before the dinner. Yes. And the purpose of the public confrontation was to make you prove it in front of witnesses. That is what the messages say. Detective Brooks looked at the still image of Vivian's hands on my shoulders. That matters, Andrea asked. Are we looking at assault charges? Detective Brooks did not look away from the image. We are looking at aggravated assault and battery. The pregnancy factor and the pre-planning make this more serious. The district attorney will review, but this is not a misunderstanding. The word misunderstanding had been the Caldwell family's favorite blanket. They had thrown it over violence, over silence, over money, over fear. Detective Brooks folded the file closed. People with money often expect conflict to be negotiation, she said. Video has a way of disappointing them. While the legal machinery started moving, Ethan's world began to tilt. Jason Keller called me again, this time from his office phone. He sounded worse than before. The bank has opened a review on the Harbor Point financing, he said. They saw the public posts. Then someone mentioned a potential criminal investigation involving Vivian. They are asking whether trust backing could be frozen or challenged. Is the project stopping? For now, yes. The senior lender paused disbursements this morning. I heard papers shifting on his desk. Then his voice dropped. 2 project managers resigned. They do not want their names tied to a company that may be dragged into family litigation. Ethan is losing control. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt tired. That was the strange thing about karma when it finally arrived. It did not roar. It sent emails, canceled meetings, and made men who had never heard the word no start sweating in conference rooms. Vivian did not accept any of it. Of course she did not, through her attorneys. She claimed the footage lacked context. She claimed she had been reaching to steady me. She claimed I had stepped backward in a dramatic reaction. She claimed pregnancy hormones, pain, and stress had distorted my perception. Then Detective Brooks interviewed Samuel Green. Then she interviewed the server who had seen Vivian's hands. Then Nathan turned over the full exported thread. That was when Vivian's voice started to shake on calls Ethan accidentally left on speaker. One evening, while he was at my house collecting more clothes from the guest room, his phone rang on the kitchen counter. Vivian's name lit up. He answered too quickly, walking toward the hall, but not quickly enough. I heard her say, "You need to make them understand." She leaned back. Ethan whispered, "Mom, there's video." There is always a way to explain video. I stood at the sink, one hand on the edge, and realized I was listening not to a mother in fear, but to a woman who had spent her life believing reality was only a first draft, if she had enough money to edit it. That night, Margaret finally came to my house. She arrived without jewelry, without makeup, wearing a gray cardigan and carrying an envelope in both hands. She looked older than 61. Or maybe she looked like someone who had spent 30 years swallowing the same truth until it hollowed her out. We sat in my kitchen. Olivia was not there this time. Andrea was on speaker. Margaret looked at the ultrasound photo on my refrigerator and pressed her lips together. "This started before you," she said. Then she told me about Wendell Caldwell, Vivian's younger brother. Charming, reckless, the favorite. In 1996, he married a woman the family considered unsuitable. 6 months later, there was a pregnancy, a revised estate plan, and a fight over assets that drained more than $4 million from the Caldwell family before the case finally settled. Vivian never forgave the woman, never forgave Wendell. Maybe never forgave the idea that love could make money leave the room. "Was there really a baby?" I asked. Margaret looked down. "I do not know. None of us ever knew." Vivian decided not knowing was the same as being betrayed. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were old letters, copies of trust correspondence, a photograph of a much younger Vivian, standing beside a man with Ethan's smile. Then Margaret said the thing that made my skin go cold. "She did it to me too." Andrea's voice came through the phone, very calm. "Mrs. Caldwell, explain what you mean." Margaret nodded as if she had been waiting years for someone to ask it properly. "When I wanted to leave my husband in 2004, Vivian told everyone I was unstable. She threatened to cut off my children's education accounts. She called my employer. She made it impossible for me to move without losing everything. I stayed 5 more years because she convinced me I had no choice. Patter. That was the word Andrea used after Margaret left. Not an outburst. Not a single bad night. Pattern. Then Vanessa made her mistake. Once Detective Brooks requested preservation of the family chat, Vanessa began deleting messages from her phone. She asked 2 cousins to do the same. She removed photos, changed wording, and sent a new statement, claiming there had never been any plan to confront me. But Nathan's export had already been preserved. Andrea's digital consultant compared the missing message IDs with the saved thread and created a clean report showing exactly what Vanessa deleted and when. You do not erase messages that help you. By then, the Caldwells were not just losing the story. They were creating new evidence every time they tried to fix it. Ethan came to my porch 4 nights after Margaret's visit. He looked thinner. His eyes were red. The man who once walked into restaurants like the room had been expecting him stood under my porch light in a wrinkled shirt, holding no flowers, no apology letter, nothing useful. I opened the door but did not invite him in. He looked past me into the house, toward the hallway that led to the room I had started thinking of as Mia's. Then he said, "I saw the video." I waited. His voice broke. "She pushed you." The words were small, but they were finally true. I felt nothing at first, then anger sharp and clean. "You knew that before the video." He closed his... I knew what it looked like. "No," I said. "You knew what it was." He covered his face with both hands. "My mother is losing everything. The bank is reviewing the company. Vanessa is panicking. Dad is barely speaking. The DA's office called her attorney this afternoon." My heartbeat changed. "What did they say?" He lowered his hands. Detective Brooks told them the file is going to the district attorney for charges. The porch seemed to tilt beneath me, though I did not move. For months, Vivian had stood above everyone else. Above Ethan, above Richard, above Vanessa, above me. Above the baby she called a lie. Now the system was reaching up. Ethan looked at me with a fear I had never seen in him before. "Celeste," he said, voice barely steady. "I need to tell you something else." Chapter 5. The day she lost everything. He stepped closer, but I lifted my hand before he could cross the threshold. "Say it from there." Ethan looked at the floor of my porch like it might offer him a version of himself he could still respect. "I knew she was going to confront you." The words were soft, but they struck harder than the fall. I knew she thought you were lying. Vanessa told me Mom wanted to make you prove it in front of everyone. I thought it would be embarrassing. I thought it would be cruel. But I told myself if you were really pregnant, the proof would shut her up. I stared at him. You walked me into that room knowing they were waiting for me. His face folded in on itself. I didn't think she would touch you. No, I said. You just thought she would humiliate me. He started crying then, not the dramatic kind. The exhausted kind. The kind that comes from a man's realizing too late that fear has made every choice for him. She controls everything, he said. The trust, the company, the loans. Harbor Point is dead if she cuts me off. Caldwell Development is dead. I'm dead. I looked past him to the dark street beyond my porch. That was the truth he had chosen. Not his wife. Not his child. His company. His mother's money. The shape of his life. Andrea asked him to come in for a recorded statement 2 days later. He agreed at first. He showed up in her office wearing the same navy suit he had worn to our rehearsal dinner, and for one strange moment I saw the man I married. Nervous, beautiful, ruined, Andrea placed the recorder on the table. Ethan, all we need is the truth. He nodded. His hands shook, then his phone lit up. Vivian. He looked at the screen for 3 seconds, and I watched him leave me again without standing up. His voice changed after that call. Smaller, colder. He said the footage looked bad, but context mattered. He said Vivian had been emotional. He said I had turned toward the wall. He said nobody could know what anyone intended in a chaotic moment. Andrea stopped the recorder. Mr. Caldwell, are you changing your statement? He did not look at me. I'm saying I won't accuse my mother of something I can't prove. I stood up. You can prove it. You saw it. His jaw tightened. I saw my wife and my mother in a terrible situation. That was the last sentence he spoke to me as my husband. The next week, his signed statement arrived through Vivian's attorneys. It described the fall as a tragic accident caused by confusion, emotion, and poor footing. It said Vivian reached toward me but did not shove me. It said Ethan believed I had stepped backward. I read it once, then I placed it in Andrea's file and removed my wedding ring. The legal process did not explode the way people imagine. It moved carefully, quietly, document by document. Detective Lauren Brooks completed her interviews. Samuel Green, the Grand Harbor event manager, confirmed the incident report under oath. The server confirmed Vivian's hands on my shoulders. Nathan authenticated the family chat. Andrea's digital consultant produced a timeline showing the deleted messages, the edits, and Vanessa's failed attempt to scrub the planning thread after the subpoena. Vanessa gave 3 different versions in 3 separate statements. First, she said there was no plan. Then she said there had been concern, but no confrontation scheduled. Then she said she could not remember who brought up the idea of asking me to prove the pregnancy. The recovered chat answered for her. When the preliminary hearing came, I expected a courtroom like television, dark wood, dramatic speeches, a judge pounding a gavel. It was not like that. It was a plain room with fluorescent lights, a clerk with reading glasses, and lawyers moving paper from one table to another, while the rest of us sat inside the consequences of what had been done. Vivian arrived in a cream suit, pearls at her throat, face calm in the way rich women learn to wear calm like armor. Richard sat beside her. Vanessa sat behind them, pale and stiff. Ethan sat at the end of their row and did not look at me. I sat with Andrea on one side and Olivia on the other. My cast was gone by then, but my wrists still ached when it rained. Mia was growing unmistakable now beneath the black dress I wore because it was comfortable and because I refused to dress like a victim for people who had already tried to make me one. Andrea presented the evidence in order. The hospital records. The photographs of my bruises. The ultrasound dated 2 days before the party, the Grand Harbor footage, the incident report, the witness statements, then Nathan's exported group chat. Vivian's face changed for the first time when her own words appeared on the screen. Make her prove it in front of everyone. The room went silent. Not polite silent, not awkward silent. The kind of silence that comes when a lie has nowhere left to stand. Vanessa lowered her eyes. Richard closed his. Ethan stared at the table as if the grain of the wood had become the most important thing in the world. Then Andrea placed the prenup into evidence. This agreement was drafted by the Caldwell family's own counsel in 2022, she said. It states repeatedly that Celeste Rowan has no direct claim to the Caldwell Legacy Trust. No distribution rights, no management rights, no access to trust assets through marriage. The accusation that she invented a pregnancy for access to $18 million is contradicted by the document the Caldwells themselves required her to sign. That was when Vivian finally looked at me. Not with guilt. Not exactly. With disbelief. She had built a lock to keep me out. She had forgotten locks can also prove someone never tried to enter. The judge confirmed the case would proceed, and the district attorney's office formally filed charges for aggravated assault and battery involving a pregnant victim. Vivian's attorneys objected to nearly everything. The judge overruled enough for the shape of the future to become clear. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited because Vivian Caldwell had spent decades making herself important in rooms that loved important people. Charity boards, hospital galas, historic preservation committees. When the charges became public, those same rooms began learning the art of distance. Within 2 weeks, Vivian stepped down from the Harbor Women's Foundation board. Then from the Museum Council. Then from the family office, temporarily at first, then permanently after Richard and the independent trustee voted to suspend her authority pending the criminal case. Money had been her language. For the first time in her life, people stopped listening. Vanessa lost her position, directing the Caldwell Charities marketing arm. After the deleted messages became part of Discovery, the official statement said she was pursuing private opportunities. Everyone knew what that meant. Ethan's world collapsed more quietly. The Harbor Point lender withdrew. Caldwell Development sold a controlling stake to a larger firm out of New York. Jason Keller resigned. Ethan kept a title but not power, not control, not the illusion that he had built something on his own. Richard surprised me in November. He came to Andrea's office alone, older than I remembered, shoulders rounded under a gray coat. He asked to make a statement, not for strategy, not for Vivian. For the record. I should have stopped her, he said. I have spent 40 years calling silence peace. It was not peace, it was permission. It did not fix anything. But it mattered that someone in that family finally said the quiet part out loud. I filed for divorce before Christmas. Ethan did not fight it. Maybe because there was nothing left to fight for. Maybe because Vivian no longer had the power to turn his cowardice into strategy. He came by once in late January. After the first snowfalls, while I was assembling the crib in Mia's room, with Olivia reading instructions badly from the floor. He stood outside on the walkway and looked through the open front door. His eyes went to the pale green walls, the white crib, the little stack of folded onesies on the chair. For a second, his face broke completely. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stood in the doorway with one hand on my stomach. "No." He nodded like he deserved that answer and hated that he deserved it. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know, I love her already." I felt Mia shift, a soft roll beneath my ribs, then become the kind of man she will not have to recover from. I closed the door gently. My final ultrasound before delivery was on a cold morning in February. Olivia came with me, of course. She had become the person who knew how to sit in silence without trying to fill it. The technician moved the wand across my belly, and there was me on the screen, stubborn, curled, one tiny hand near her face. Then the heartbeat filled the room, strong, steady. "Alive," I cried. But not the way I had cried after the fall. These tears did not come from fear. They came from the strange relief of realizing I had made it through a war no one else could see from the outside. I had not destroyed the Caldwell family. I had not taken their money. I had not set out to ruin Vivian. All I had done was refuse to let them turn violence into misunderstanding, fear into obedience, and my daughter into a price tag. A week later, I stood in Mia's room alone. The crib was finished. The curtains were hung. Olivia had left a stuffed rabbit on the rocking chair. On the small white shelf by the window, I placed the first ultrasound photo, the one from before the party, the one Vivian had demanded I prove in front of strangers. I stood there for a long time with my hand on my stomach. The house was quiet. Not empty. Quiet. For the first time since the night on the terrace, quiet did not feel like danger. It felt like safety. When people ask me what justice felt like, they expect me to talk about Vivian losing her boards, or Vanessa losing her job, or Ethan losing control of the company he thought made him a man. Those things happened. They mattered. But justice, real justice, was smaller than that. It was standing in a room I owned, in a house I paid for, listening to my daughter's heartbeat and knowing no one in the Caldwell family could ever again decide what was true for me. If you have ever been called dramatic for telling the truth, or unstable for refusing to be erased, I hope you remember this. Silence is not weakness when you are gathering proof. Calm is not surrender when you are protecting what matters. And sometimes the person everyone expects to break is the one who walks out with the record, the truth, and the child they tried to turn into a lie. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Would you have forgiven Ethan? Or was his silence the final betrayal? And if you want more stories about quiet strength, family betrayal, and justice that arrives one document at a time, stay with this channel. There is always another truth waiting to be heard.